Hello and welcome back to another ProGuides video. Are you just picking up random units in the shop and hoping they work? Trust us, that's what we did in our first few games too. But after more practice, our Grandmaster and Challenger analysts have compiled a brand new Synergies tier list to make your lives easier. Now, you'll know which Synergies will be worth going for. Remember that just because something is in the S tier, it doesn't guarantee you a win over someone that has a Synergy in the D tier. With the patch, many Synergies are very easy to make, requiring only 2 to 3 units. We're here to present you the list based on not only how OP they are, but also how consistent they've been in getting to the top 4 of each game. But before we begin, remember to click our link below in our description to see more in-depth guides, builds, and ways to win you your next games. There are many courses designed by pro players within the top 1% of the game to teach you the meta and how to effectively climb up the ladder. So if you want to get to the top 4 of your games, then go to ProGuides.com today and we will see you there. Link will be included in the description below. Alright, let's jump back into the tier list. With our S tier, we have Berserkers, Desert, Summoners, Rangers, and Mage. So starting with Berserkers first. Berserkers leap to the nearest enemy no matter what, and then has a chance to hit all units in a cone with their attacks. So just think of melee characters that have Titanic Hydra equipped in them already. At first, this might sound underwhelming, but there's a few champions that really makes this synergy shine. Most compositions these days are fairly squishy, but Berserker all uses strong frontliner. We have Jax with Iceborne Gauntlet to slow down all enemies, Mundo to regenerate all his health being a great tank, and Scion to provide CC. But the strongest one of them all is Olaf. We do expect him to get nerfed next patch, but for now, he's a monster. Unable to be CC'd once his ability goes off, and automatically getting the Glacial Synergy as well once you find all 6 Berserkers, he will just go around smashing every unit. Forcing Berserkers may cause you to lose a lot of health early game, but once you get to late game and get the Bloodthirster and Dragonclaw on Olaf, you can expect a win streak. Next up is Desert. Desert is simply an armor reduction, which is great against tanky compositions. Although, as mentioned, lots of compositions aren't usually heavily tanky. Desert is in our S tier due to how great our unit synergizes with their element. Sivir has Ricochet to attack multiple people at once, Kha'Zix is constantly jumping around to different targets, and Renekton attacks all those around him like Darius used to. There's also Azir, who's simply a good unit as well. Due to how great the units are and how well they proc the Desert synergy, we see it as S tier material. Moving on to Rangers. Rangers has gotten a significant buff in patch 9.22, allowing you to go up to 6 Rangers with 100% chance of doubling their attack speed. Kindred is also one of the best units in the game, with 3 different synergies along with Twitch who can proc different on-hit abilities. Now we have Summoners. To be frank with you, Summoners is insane right now, and we do expect this to be nerfed heavily. Almost every single Summoner is good, including the 1-cost unit Zyra, who can last from early to late game. They fill up the extra board space so quickly and is a hard counter to many as their summoned units become the main targets of the enemy's focus, allowing your champions plenty of time to keep respawning and kill them. Additionally, even if all your units die, a lot of times your summoned units is able to get rid of the remaining enemies, allowing you to get the win. Last in our S tier is Mage. Mage has been one of the most satisfying compositions to build with their double cast ability. Although some mages are weaker like LeBlanc or Talia, the Spatula item Mage Cap allows you to replace one of them to turn a strong unit into your insane carry. Summoners are especially great with Mage Cap as you can now get doubled the spawned units. Next up is our A tier with Mountain, Inferno, Light, Assassin, Poison, Mystic, and Shadow. First is Mountain, which is amazing, especially if you're able to find your Malphite early at level 5 or 6. The 1500 shield provides such tankiness to the team, and since it only requires 2 units, it's incredibly easy to make and a great way to buff up the resilience of your composition. Malphite is arguably one of the best units in the game as well with the CC he provides. If it's a Mountain Hex game, this synergy would even be considered as S tier as you're able to use Qiyana as your second unit for a great assassin and stun. However, on a normal basis with 75% of the maps, it requires you to use Talia, who is much more underwhelming. Next up is Inferno. Inferno is a synergy that is easily obtained in the early game with Diana and Zyra both being 1-cost Infernos. It's a great aggressive synergy that deals additional damage. Ranging from 3 different tiers where you can have anywhere from just 3 units to 9, Inferno makes for a great synergy to throw into most compositions. Now to probably people's favorite synergy to force, Light. If you're able to obtain all 9 units, it's going to be close to impossible to beat you, as all units are constantly healing and getting more attack speed. Reminded us a little bit of Nobles during the early patches in Set 1, where if you get your Kale, then it was basically a guaranteed top 4. However, Light is fairly weak in the early and mid game, which can cause you to lose too much health too quickly. Most of the units that complete the composition is late in the game, like Yorick or Lux. You also need to make the Light item in order to get the final tier with 9 units. More requirements, but if you complete them, then GG. Next up is our returning synergy, Assassin. With so many compositions with prominent squishies in the back line, assassins are great to put into most comps. They're a great counter to rangers, mages, summoners, and many more. Having at least 3 assassins in composition make for a well-balanced team, so you have units focusing on the front and back lines. Moving on to Poison. Poison is essentially our demon substitute this set, being the only synergy to be related to the enemy's mana. The target's mana pool becomes increased by 50%, which makes for a great soft counter to mages, summoners, and more to slow them drastically from using their ability. The units Twitch and Singed plays a great role in this synergy, as Twitch has long range and Singed runs around spreading the poison unaffected by any CC. Now to a more defensive synergy, it's Mystic. Mystic, unlike Dragon's last patch, is a synergy that provides magic resist to all units. This is a great soft counter to all the mages and ability-based compositions out there. It simply only requires 2 units for the first buff, making it easy to transition into the late game if you feel the need for it. 2 of the units within Mystic are the best supports in the game as well, with Janna and Nami both providing great CC from the backline to protect your carries. And on the other hand, last in our A tier is the aggressive synergy, Shadow. Shadow is not an OP synergy where if you obtain all 4, you're guaranteed the win. However, it is a synergy that lands itself consistently in the top 4, especially if you itemize correctly. Each unit also allows you to run Shadow with a lot of different combinations. Shadow Mages with Veigar, Shadow Summoners with Malzahar, or even Shadow Rangers with Kindred. So many possibilities, simply choose the carry you want. Moving on to our B tier, we have Steel, Predator, Avatar, Alchemist, Cloud, Blademaster, Glacial, and Woodland. First up is Steel. Steel is immunity from damage for a duration when the unit drops to 50% health. This is especially strong in the early and mid game, as teams will have an incredibly hard time dealing with the invulnerability as they tend to be fairly squishy themselves. Those few seconds is enough for Steel units to get you the early win streak. However, late game, once everyone has their damage and tankiness much higher, Steel units will tend to fall off, landing them in our B tier. Moving on, we also have Predator. Predator is great as they will instantly kill units under 20% health, making Runans a great item to proc the synergy. Unfortunately, Predator shines the most once you obtain all the items for it, so it ends up being a bit bait early game as the units are all low cost with Kog'Maw, Rek'Sai, and Skarner. We've seen many times where players grab these 3 units early to get Predators, but without the items for them early or mid-game, they tend to lose 50 or more health by the time they get to Wolves. However, if you work your early game correctly and search for the right items, Predator has the potential to shred through your enemies quickly. Next, we have Avatar. This might sound surprising to some of you, as Avatar is essentially Lux. Avatar counts for 2 of the same synergy, so this might be amazing at some point if you find the right Lux you need late game for your composition, or one that is simply useless and you re-roll. Due to the inconsistency, it lands in our B tier. Speaking of synergies with just 1 unit, Alchemist also lands in our B tier. Don't get us wrong, Singed is arguably one of the strongest units in the game. However, Alchemist by itself means there's no targeting, as it just allows him the unit to run randomly on the map. However, being able to avoid all CC is great, so it goes into our B tier. Moving on is Cloud. Cloud grants allies dodge chance, which does sound amazing. However, the only 2 units not including Lux is Yasuo and Janna. So even though it's only 2 units, this does significantly limit the flexibility of adding Cloud to many compositions, since Yasuo falls off hard in the late game if you're unable to get him to level 3. Not a bad synergy, but there's just better ones to put in. Speaking of Yasuo, Blademaster also lands in our B tier, another synergy that is good but not exactly OP. Blademaster is now changed where only 2 units can proc the first buff. If you're running Blademasters, then Cloud becomes a decent pair to go with this synergy. And now to Glacial. Glacial is amazing in a Glacial Berserker composition or Glacial Rangers. The stuns are great for your team. Glacial is a synergy you want to add towards the late game to give a buff to your team, but it's not one that you want to search for from the beginning. Glacial units by themselves can be somewhat underwhelming, but it's about the synergy you pair them with that gets them to the top 4. Last in our list is Woodland. Woodland is most likely the strongest synergy there is during the early game. They're tanky and essentially gives you an additional unit, which is extremely powerful when there's only 3 to 4 units in the game. The reason we put it in B tier is because Woodland does tend to fall off quickly if you don't build the proper carries around them, or the second strategy, which is to hyper roll and get them to level 3. We've seen many players fail with Woodland due to their great early game, but unable to transition properly as they take damage throughout the mid to late game. And now to our C tier. We're getting to the lower tiers, but it doesn't mean that these synergies are an instant loss. It simply means that these synergies are ones that you wouldn't want to focus building towards, but oftentimes they'll automatically be part of your composition without you even trying. In the C tier, we have Ocean, Druid, and Warden. So let's start with Ocean, which is fine. It's mana regeneration, so it can pair well with mages or summoners. Vladimir, Thresh, and Nautilus gears toward being more defensive units, thus many people make the mistake of grabbing Ocean units early and dying quickly because of it. Don't aim for Oceans, aim for mages first, and then Ocean will eventually be part of your final composition without you trying for it. And next is Druid. Woodland and Druid are essentially the same units. Again, great for the early game. The Druid part allows your unit to be much tankier for the early game, but the Woodland synergy is what potentially keeps you in the late game, as that additional unit on a 3 cost or a Lux can become quite OP. And lastly, we have Warden. Warden is basically the only soft counter to Rangers, but then gets hard countered by Deserts. Again, if you already have one Warden, doesn't hurt to throw one in late game to buff up the team. However, unlike Knights last season, you wouldn't actively look for them through early to late game, as these tanks will not carry you. And finally, in our D tier, we have Electric and Crystal. So let's start with Electric, and don't get us wrong, this one is not a super weak synergy, it's just incredibly awkward to build around. The lowest cost unit is Ornn, which is pretty underwhelming. And then after that, it's a rare and 2 legendaries that you need to complete a full Electric synergy. Volibear is also a mediocre champion, so you're really counting on the Zed to fully bring the synergy to full use. Electric is perfectly fine to use in a composition, but don't force it with the Ornn in the early game as it's incredibly risky. Last in our tier list is Crystal. Crystal is simply underwhelming compared to all the OP compositions out there. Ashe got a fairly hard nerf this patch compared to PBE, making it less appealing than before. Tariq's ultimate also takes too long to go off, so half your team is usually dead before you can use his ability. Being the only 2 Crystal champions of a rare and legendary, it's pretty costly to add in. It's really only a Rangers composition that you might see some use of Crystal, but it's not a synergy we recommend to go for normally. And that's it for today's video. As rank isn't out yet, there's a lot of these synergies you might see that have been working. Sure, your Crystal Predator game may have won you a game, but it does not mean it's good. These are all synergies that our analysts have seen be the most consistent in landing in the top 4. But we'll be sure to update once again when rank comes out. We'll also have a top 5 compositions coming soon, so even though something may have been in the B tier, you might see it in the top 5 as it pairs great with an S tier synergy. Let us know in the comments below what compositions have been your favorite so far, and like and subscribe, and we'll see y'all again soon.